you're like me, you spend lots of time poring over maps, looking at weather data, all in an effort to help predict when and where my best times to hunt will be. It'd be nice if there was a reliable source with all this information in one place. Enter the Spartan Forge app. Unlike some other predictive apps on the market, Spartan Forge was created from military combat intelligence experience tailored for hunters, and stands at the nexus of machine learning and white-tailed deer hunting. No more man-made algorithms. This is a predictive model based on real GPS collared deer data, historical and predictive weather, and the next level of mapping imagery, all at my fingertips. I've been using the iOS app this season, and it has replaced all my other mapping tools. Visit SpartanForge.ai and sign up today, or head to your iOS or Android app store. Use the promo code TRUTH to save some money and download it today. Mobile hunters, if you're interested in upping your mobile game, then head to tetherednation.com and check out their saddle gear. There are a few things you can actually buy that will help you become a better deer hunter or give you the freedom to hunt any tree or any situation. This is the reason why I started saddle hunting in the first place and why I use Tethered's gear. I can honestly say that Tethered's saddle gear has changed how I hunt for the better. Big tree, little tree, from the ground, it doesn't matter. I'm untethered by my gear to hunt the best setup for the situation, instead of hunting for a tree that my gear can use. My current core setup consists of the Phantom saddle, tethered one sticks, and the Predator platform, along with an assortment of their accessories. So if you want to up your mobile game, head over to tetherednation.com. Welcome to the Truth from a Stand Deer Hunting Podcast, brought to you by Spartan Forge. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 321. Today I'm joined by my buddy Jace Allen to talk about chasing a season and killing a Booner in a high-pressured piece of public land. So stay tuned. All right. What is up, everyone? Happy Wednesday to you. Hope you are doing well. Hope you are feeling fine. My weekend was actually a pretty good weekend. Nothing hunting related, except I did hang out with my buddy Aaron Hepler. He and I got together on Saturday, I think it was, and hung out. Talked some hunting, shot some bows, watched a little hunting on watched a little whitetail adrenaline. It was an old video because I don't know if the new one came out or not yet. I actually haven't looked. So it was an old video. I just like to I rewatch them because they are that good. But that's basically what my weekend what I had in store for my weekend. But the best part of the weekend was, if you heard the podcast I did with Dan Johnson, the Nine-Fingered Wonder, we talked a little grappling in that podcast, and we talked Penn State wrestling and Iowa Hawkeye wrestling. There was a big meet that was coming up that happened this past weekend, and I guess safe to say Iowa still has the better deer and Pennsylvania still has the better wrestling, because the Nittany Lions pulled out the win, and we'll look forward to the March timeframe when we get to the Big Tens and Nationals and see what happens. And maybe Dan and I can make a wager of some sort. Maybe the loser has to wear the opposing team's singlet for a photo op for social media. I don't know. I don't know if we can get that lined up or not. Maybe you guys DM Dan Johnson and ask him to take the singlet bet with me, and we'll see if we can make that happen. It'd be hilarious. But we're gonna just kind of jump into things today. I have a couple things I want to pass along to you guys. You guys, if you're local or nearby, the Great American Outdoor Show is getting ready to kick off. I don't have my phone in front of me, and I don't recall what the first day of the actual of the event is. I want to say it's the 4th. I think it's the 4th through the 14th, if I'm not mistaken, of February. I'll be there on the 4th, hanging out with my buddies at Exodus. Their booth is in the archery hall, and I'll be spending a little bit of time at the tethered booth as well. I think they're also in the archery hall, and I think their booth number is 1033, if memory serves. Also, our buddies over at Exodus, if you haven't gotten word yet, they are launching their new Exodus Rival camera, which is their budget-friendly trail camera. So the cool thing about Exodus, what they've always done, it's kind of the inception of the brand and of their products, is they pay attention to what works, what doesn't work, and basically what normal people, hunters, are looking for. They take, your real-time feedback and try to figure out how they make their products better or make better products, just period. And that was kind of the genesis of the Exodus Rival cell camera. They heard at trade shows and stuff like that, people were looking for a more budget-friendly cell camera, but one that wasn't faulty, if you will. There's other options out there that just don't have quite the the same backing that Exodus does in terms of like their in terms of their support and just like how rugged they're made and how well they work. And so what they did is they went to the lab and they created the Exodus Rival, which is a budget friendly trail camera that comes in, or cell camera that comes in at $179. And it just flat out works just like you would expect all like any of their other cameras work, whether it's the lift or the render. And of course, this is also backed by their Exodus Advantage 5-year no BS warranty. And so the Rival's built with the same kind of durability that you are used to with all the Exodus products, but with lightning fast cellular capabilities. So it's easy to use, easy to set up. You get great photos. And while they were developing the Exodus Rival, their goal was really simple. It was design something that was very simple yet very effective cell camera that just flat out worked, no fuss, no muss. And so a few of the things, you can find all this stuff on their website at exodusoutdoorgear.com, but a few of the specs just to kind of give you a heads up is a 0.3 second trigger speed, 70-foot detection distance, with adjustable sensitivity, 30-second photo transmission, adjustable image quality, on upload photos, crisp HD images. It's compatible with the SP18 solar panel, which I use on all my cell cameras. And then, again, it has the 5-year no BS warranty. So the Exodus Rival is officially, it opened for pre-sale. I think it was January 16th, so it's been open for about a half a month now. And it will run, or actually they'll start to ship those I believe February 6th. So you can use the code LAUNCH, that's LAUNCH, and you can save $30 off each camera while supplies last. And they're basically going to run this thing until February 14th at midnight, or until they run out of cameras, if they run out of cameras before that. So if you're not hopped on, if it's something you want to pick up, I would head over to exodusoutdoorgear.com and pick that up now. Also, our buddies at BHA, so Backcountry Hunters and Anglers of Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania chapter. If you guys don't know what they are, they're basically a group of grassroots folks, grassroots organization of outdoorsmen, men and women that are really kind of focused on, speaking up for wildlife, hunting heritage. They're, help get involved with some of the Sunday hunting stuff. And so they're just a really good organization that kind of has hunters and outdoorsmen's kind of best interests in mind. If this sounds like something like you would be interested in, or sounds like people like you, they will be at the Great American Outdoor Show. They will be at booth 4707 in the Outfitter Hall. Also on Friday, February 10th, they're going to be at the Appalachian Brewing Company after the outdoor show for a backyard bash with a special guest. The BHA president and CEO, Lantani, will be there to speak. So if you want to find out more details and a link for the event so that you can RSVP so they kind of know how many people are coming, you can check them out on Facebook and Instagram as well. Or you can just go to backcountryhunters.org/Pennsylvania, and that'll get you in the right spot to get all the deets for what they have coming up. So with that, we're going to go ahead and jump into today's show. Have a killer show for you guys today. Have my buddy Jace Allen on from Missouri. So I had him on, I want to say, it was probably late summer sometime. It was right before the season opened. Because he had a hell of a year last year, I guess 2021, where he killed 3 bucks, hammer bucks. And we talked a little bit about on that show. He didn't divulge a lot of the details because it was kind of still coming to kind of into focus, if you will. But he was really going to try to take as much time off this past fall and hunt as much as he possibly could. Like, he basically wanted to hunt all fall from beginning of the season to the end of the season, wanted to travel to a couple different states. He had some goals for himself, and, he's passionate about whitetails, and he wanted to see what it was like to just go out and do it and just that be your focus for 3-4 months, out of the year. And he learned a lot of lessons along the way. And then had, a killer hunt, very early in the season where he ended up killing a Booner. And the story of how that kind of went down is pretty incredible, considering the amount of pressure and the number of people who actually knew that deer was around. And the way he got it done is pretty effing cool, if I'm being quite honest. So with that, we're going to go ahead and just jump into today's show. And as always, thank you all for listening. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of The Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. And today I got a repeat offender on, my buddy, Mr. Jace freaking Allen. So I put the F in there, man. How you feel about that? Feel okay?
That feels pretty good.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Nice, man. How you been, buddy?
Oh, not too bad. Just trying to get over the deer season blues, the end of deer season blues, that is.
Yeah.
It's it's not going good so far, but we'll see if we make it.
Yeah, you need some therapy, maybe you need treatment.
Just a little bit.
That's awesome, man. So I always go through this phase of, you know, where I'm kind of looking for the end, where I'm going like, oh my god, like I just like because every day, like I'll get up, not every day because with work and stuff like that, but on days that I can get out,
Mhm.
especially after I get back, being a married guy, et cetera, et cetera. Once I get back from like any type of trip that I'm going to take during the rut. So usually like after Thanksgiving, it
Mhm.
gets really hard for me to get out because not that my wife's the coolest. Like if I want to go hunt, as long as there's not like something that we've previously planned or whatever,
Mhm.
she doesn't care. She's like, go hunt, do what you got to do because she knows that's if not, I'm going to be a miserable SOB to be around. So,
Right.
but it's kind of like an unstated, I guess, rule in our marriage that we've had for years, where it's just like, look, you let me do what I need to do from like middle of September until like Thanksgiving. And after Thanksgiving, I know Christmas is coming up and stuff like that. Like I'll become like a normal human and a normal husband again, and I'll, family first and, we'll do all that stuff. And I won't go hunt like every waking, moment that I have free time or whatever.
Right.
And so there's always this like internal struggle for me of like when I have a free Saturday and I'm like, and I wake up and I'm like, oh man, I could go out and hunt today. I'm like, oh man, I should probably clean the gutters. Man, I don't want to clean the gutters today. I want to go hunt, but I'm like, oh man, it's after Thanksgiving, And so then I end up like talking myself out of going. I'm probably better off for it, but that's usually like my therapy. Is I'll start tinkering with gear is what my therapy becomes like once I kind of realize my season is over.
Mhm.
What do you anticipate kind of doing to kind of get yourself through like the deer season blues as you called them?
I mean, pretty much just try to. I don't know if you. I don't know if a guy could say like outrun that, feeling or that depression or whatever, but basically just try to stay as busy as possible. That's pretty much the game plan. Um,
Right.
Other than that, I don't I don't really have a whole lot.
Right. I know when we were setting this up, I was like, hey man, when you want to get together and you're like, dude, I've got no life since deer season is over. Just call me.
Please, for the love of God, somebody talk to me about deer.
Right. It's crazy though, man, because like you had an epic year just from an experience standpoint. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's there are very few dudes, and I'm 100% honest about this. I think my buddy Chad and I've talked about this in the past. There are some guys, or a lot of guys will say, deer hunting 365, 24/7, 365, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm honest with myself. I'm not one of those guys. When I go out on a hunting, like when I'm going to go hunt, if I have a 2-week trip or a 3-week trip planned or whatever, I might take some days off in there, maybe wake up late a day or whatever the case is. But man, what my breaking point is for me personally is like 16 days straight. After that,
Yep.
it's like I need like a little break, a little reset, a couple days, whatever. I'm not one of these guys that can go just do it day in and day out. But this year, like your past season, man, was crazy. So I'm just curious, and we'll get into like more of the details of it. But like, what was your like longest run of days that you did this past year before kind of calling a timeout?
Let's see, the longest run of days that would have been November the November the 5th through December the 16th, I believe.
Wow,
That was my longest run.
that's a stretch. That's hunting every day those days.
Yeah, that was hunting every day. So there was some travel in there because I hunted. I wasn't in the same place the whole time. The
Right,
the longest span that I spent in one place in one time, that was Kentucky, and that
right.
was that was 20 days.
20 days.
Um, but that stretch of time, the first, let's see, it was like the first month was just Missouri, and I didn't hunt in the same place because we have rifle season going on, and I go back home and hunt with my family, and
Right.
try to go away and hunt some of the deer I've been hunting all year. And then in that stretch, I went to Nebraska, trying to shoot a mule deer, and then I went back to Illinois,
Okay.
for a couple days.
Right. Man, because I know the last time, and people are probably like, "What the hell are they talking about?" Like all these consecutive days. But the last time you were on when we were talking, for this upcoming season, or the one that has just passed, you
Mm,
were planning, to take like the most time off, or, do your most extensive hunting trip that you have ever done, and it
yeah.
was, you were, and I was stoked for you, man, because like that's, I think anyone who has the opportunity to do that, or as much time as they can take, whatever you like to do, go do that thing as often as you can. And
Mm,
so I think it's a thing that a lot of people think about, but don't necessarily like bring it to fruition, if you will. And
right.
so where did the idea or the plan come from to be like, you know what, I'm gonna just hunt from September till the cows come home, essentially?
It started actually at my old 9 to 5 job. Just the day in and day out. I go to work and I get home, and like in the winter time, there's an hour of daylight left after work. And so after time change, you really don't get any time to hunt. So you have a lot of time to think.
Mhm.
And just sitting there, in the office day in and day out, it had me thinking. And I had taken off like 2 years ago. I had taken off like all my vacation time and actually switched roles in that company to where I could hunt the evenings more.
Mhm.
And then we actually got to turkey season, and I'd work 7 o'clock in the morning till 4 o'clock in the evening, and so that left me zero time to go chase around turkeys. So this thought in my head, not only applied to just that, but just other things. And it was my want basically to not be average. And the thought that came across my head is, you can be the best at whatever it is in the world, but if you don't have the time,
Mhm.
all you're ever going to be is average.
Yeah.
And that's the thought that really started that whole thing.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I love, deer hunting. I've grown up deer hunting. And it's just like, what if there was just one thing that you just absolutely just went after, just do or die, just put all your chips in that pot,
Mhm.
just go all in. And I'm like, it sounds great. Let's
Right.
do it.
Right. Like sometimes, man, the answers to the biggest questions sometimes are the simplest answers, right?
Mm,
Like, and you're so right. When you say you could be the best at anything, and you'll never know really how good you are until you put the time in.
yep.
You know what I mean? That goes with hunting, running a business, like whatever the case it is. You know what I mean?
Mm,
It's, I forget who I was talking to. I think it might have been Zach Farrenbaugh at one point. He and I were
mm,
were talking, and I want to say it was maybe 2 years ago. And and a lot of people will have kind of, or I won't say have, they'll suffer from expectations that are just unreasonable for themselves based
mm,
on their ability to have the time to achieve whatever the thing is, right?
right.
And we were talking about obviously deer hunting specifically, and he gave an example, and he was like, "Look, deer hunting's, his job, right? That's like with the
Mm,
hunting public, that's his job." He's like, in between being behind the camera and behind a bow, now the one year they killed a bunch. This was like the year they had kind of like an off year. He was like,
yeah.
I think he said he was in the field, I think 100 days, like in
Mm,
total, right? Like between behind the camera and behind a bow for, I think it was
yeah.
for deer season. And he was like, I was part of 2 bucks being killed the whole season.
Mm,
He was like,
yep.
one I killed. He was like, and one I was filming when it killed. And he didn't count like the does and stuff that they shot. He was like, just 2 bucks.
Right.
He was like, that's pretty normal. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? He's like, that's 2% of the time you're gonna win.
Mm,
And that 2% might not happen this year or next year. It might be 3 years from now.
yep.
You know what I mean? He was like, so people need to kind of think about that in context and not beat themselves up. It's like if they're not filling tags every single year, he's like, most people don't. He's like,
Yeah.
that's a reality of it. He's like, especially if you have 5 days, 10 days, whatever it is, it's
Mm,
exponentially harder. So I'm
yeah.
just curious for you, man. Like, so you set this out where it's like time is the thing I need more
Yep.
of, right? I want to I
Mm,
want to challenge myself. I want to see put all my chips in the middle, and I need the time to do that. So when you were headed into this, like what was your what was your goal in general, or did you even think about it in terms of a goal, or were you just kind of going out to have an experience?
Well, I mean, always try to set some sort of goal. I think the last time I talked to you, my goal, my goal going into season, or at least I thought, was I wanted to shoot, I wanted to shoot 4 bucks.
Hmm.
Um, you know, fill, fill four buck tags. Didn't care where they were.
Right.
Of a certain class. But that, sorry, I'm kind of losing my train of thought. Can you rephrase that question?
Yeah, yeah. I was just saying, when you headed into this, this thing, into this trip, if you will, did
Yeah.
you have any kind of goal in your mind, kind of like, I want to accomplish this, or were you more
Oh,
just looking for the experience?
yeah. So like one thing that I always think about is like, okay, so there's however many months of deer season.
Mhm.
What what part of the year do I know the least about? And I am going to put a heavy emphasis on that time of year. And last year it was, I'll just be honest, yeah, I haven't hunted a whole lot in, the month of November, the rut,
Mhm.
a lot of my life. It's been, a lot of early season, in October stuff, and I enjoy late season too, but like the rut, I just didn't have a lot of experience with. I didn't understand the phases, and that's one thing that I always try to work on is like, work on my weak points.
Mhm.
And and it's new, and I love new,
Right.
new stuff, new experiences, traveling different places, getting to hunt, new dirt, places I've never been before.
Right.
Learn about the whole, month of November. That was kind of some general goals that I had going in.
Right. So when you got to that month of November, and we're going to skip around a little bit here, but
Yeah.
when you got to that month of November, what was it like, based off of what you said, where it was like, that didn't hunt it a whole lot, just historically,
Hmm.
phases maybe weren't as clear to me that they maybe are to some, some other folks or whatever. So when you
Hmm.
look back on that time period, what was it that you kind of learned, or what was the big kind of like, aha or watershed moment, if you will?
Well, I figured a guy needs to, if he is going to start, hunting during a rutcation,
Hmm.
um, November the 5th is actually kind of late to start that.
Hmm.
Um, because I did get the chance to hunt a couple days while I was like, working off and on,
Hmm.
like October the 28th, the 29th, 30th. And I tell you what, those were some really, really good days to be out in the field, hearing from buddies and whatnot. And I wasn't there. So that was like the first like, oh, okay.
Right.
Like, there's, rut and, cruising activity, like pretty hardcore, going on in late October. And I just didn't know that.
Right.
there
Nice.
was there was one morning like November the 1st. I'm almost to this job site, and there's a giant buck across the road right in front of me chasing doe, and I'm like, what am I doing with my life?
That's awesome, man. Yeah, dude, that time period is always, just in general, it seems like um that's the sweet spot, right? Like
Mm,
I've also, I think it's also somewhat dependent in like the areas. Like I know for me, like the one place I go to in Kansas, like if you don't hunt any other day, hard or whatever, if you will, November 6th is the day that you don't want to miss.
right.
And I've hunted that date 2 years in a row now, and both days. I mean, this year on November 6th, dude, I saw 30 deer, and
Jesus.
I think I might have saw like 7, 8 bucks or something. I forget what it was, but it was like the most deer I'd ever seen in one day. Not
Jeez.
sitting like a food source. Like I was like
Right.
in a draw. You know what I mean?
Uh.
Like, um, and certainly the most bucks I've ever seen in one day. It
Mm-hmm.
was just bananas, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then in certain areas, like around here, there's a particular place I like to hunt where it's like, man, October 18th, the day. 2 years in a row,
Mm-hmm.
like I've had the deer I wanted to kill show up at that spot
Mm.
on October 18th. Just
Yeah.
that spot.
That's
You know what I mean?
right.
So, man, so was most of this trip? were you solo on most of this, or I shouldn't say trip because I know you went all over the place, but like this past season, was a lot of what you were doing, was it solo, or did you have any company, along with you once in a while?
Very, very seldom do people come hunt with me. Like if I'm going out hunting, it's very, very rare that I take somebody along with me. I think there was one guy in Kentucky that sat in a tree with me this year, and I think that was about it.
Yeah.
So it's all pretty much solo. Now the mule deer hunting in Nebraska, that was with buddies.
Okay. Now is that out of your preference? You just prefer to be solo?
Yeah, that's my preference. I mean, I could go into that quite a bit, but usually what I've noticed, I love my friends and all that.
I love my
Uh,
friends. I hear a
yeah,
strong I hear a strong butt coming.
but whenever you're out there, and whether if you make a decision, whether it's right or wrong, it's not always going to be 100% your decision. And it's
Mhm.
really the times that you're wrong that you need to pay attention to, because if there's somebody else with you, say like whatever happens,
Mhm.
you know there's there's a certain amount of blame it's going to be shifted around.
Right.
Whenever you're with another person, whenever you are by yourself hunting and you make a mistake, it's your mistake,
Mhm.
and then you can learn from your own actions,
Right.
basically.
That's interesting, man. I've never heard anybody kind of describe it like that. Like I like to hunt solo as well. Like this year's trip to Kansas was solo. My Iowa trip was solo. And
Mm,
I liked it because I just was, I didn't have anybody to cater to necessarily. I wasn't worried
yep.
about I'm supposed to meet so and so at this parking lot, or I'm supposed, you know what I mean? Like there was none of
Hmm.
that. Um and you're just kind of stuck with your own thoughts all the time.
Right.
So you're just and there's nothing else to do, so you're just constantly thinking about deer.
Right.
you know um but I will say, on some of the trips that I've been on, like I got one buddy that I do like to travel to hunt with, my buddy Chad. Like he and I do
Mm,
trips together, and it's because we both like to hunt the same way.
mm,
Our styles are very similar, so he is one guy that I will bounce stuff off of at night, you know what I mean,
mm,
like when we get back, because we usually see things the same way, you know what I
right.
mean, and so I'll use it as like a gut check,
Mm,
kind of thing. But I can totally see where, you know, where at the end of you might look at it and be like, man, I was going to do this, but I was probably influenced by the conversation we had last night, and that probably just wasn't the right thing. You know,
right.
you know,
And sometimes that can help, but back to the, I guess, kind of the main thing that I said.
yeah, that
It just being your own, figuring out your own, process and your own, way of thinking, and correcting that, and changing that throughout time.
right, right. Yeah, that's interesting, man. I need to kind of go back and reflect on some of my solo hunts and see if I was more in the game, if you will,
Mm,
on those, than maybe other trips. That's interesting. I would like to think maybe I was, because maybe I was just
mm,
a little bit more focused,
mm,
you know, and there's almost this. I don't know. I get this way where it's like I'm willing to kind of get up and do more because I'm like, I don't want to go back and be like, yeah, on that 7-day hunt, I slept in like 3 days.
right.
You know what I mean? Like, I
Right.
don't want to tell my buddies that. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Oh
Um,
yeah.
it's raining. Like, I ain't gonna get up today. Like, no, that's the hard part though too. It's like, if you have someone with you, it's like it's raining one morning like hard, and you're like, oh man, I'm sleeping. Nobody's gonna know. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
But that's when you got to kind of get some mental fortitude and just kind of power forward, I guess. But
And that what you said earlier, sorry, not to bounce
yeah.
way back, but what you said about, like, going like 16 days straight, that's pretty much, like an upper limit.
Hmm.
Well, that's something else I found this year for myself too, is I've never been able to hunt that many days, so I didn't even know what that was like.
Hmm.
And whenever I got today, it was either 15 or 16 in Kentucky.
Hmm.
Old boy was coming apart.
That's a great way to put it. Old boy was coming apart.
Yeah, things were. things were not at ease up in the house. But whenever you do put yourself in a situation to where you're there by yourself, sometimes you can, it's interesting because you start reaching out, you start reaching into the cookie jar, pulling out new things that you didn't even know were in there, maybe. Or maybe you call a friend for a little, um just like a little mental break. Or you
Yeah.
go do this or you go do that. Well, whenever you're by yourself, and this is kind of some stuff that I do enjoy. But like whenever you're by yourself and you're in it and you don't have anybody else to run to, and you can't run away from the grind, basically.
Right.
Like, all that I could do, it was all I could do. I just had to turn around and face it.
Yeah.
And that's whenever things really started going right for me.
Okay. That's interesting. So what was so at that when you reached your so I'm glad to know that like that limit isn't just my limit. It feels like it might just be like a general a general like unraveling kind of point for for a lot of
I
folks
think it
maybe.
is because I've seen other guys hunt that many days, and day 14, 15, 16 is those are those are hard days.
Yeah.
But anyways,
Yeah.
go ahead.
So I'm curious, what were some of the things? What was the unraveling? Like, I guess what was unraveling, and then what were the things you were having to kind of face to, and that was when things started going right.
So like the main thing that was going that was going on is it's whenever you're in like my particular situation there, you go for 3 days without seeing any of the deer that you're hunting. And you start thinking of all these excuses to go to other places and scout new stuff, try to hunt new deer. And I found myself wanting to do that a lot. And but I had to tell myself no. And where things really went right is whenever I made myself realize that I am not going anywhere until I find success here with one of these two deer that I'm chasing around.
Right.
And at that point, whenever I realized that I wasn't going anywhere, I wasn't doing anything else, there wasn't anything else to think about.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so all I could do was, just stay in at that point. And, the hunt got a lot more enjoyable.
Right. Yeah. That's that. There is a sense of relief might be one way to put it when you just make a decision and you're going to live within that decision.
Hmm.
Right. It starts to kind of like it starts to take away all the peripheral kind of distractions and things that you
Hmm.
might need to consider that aren't focused on that one thing, you know?
Right.
And so I always kind of say, it kind of happens, Kansas is a little bit of a different animal because you can kind of drive in glass, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Hmm.
and so, I would leave certain spots maybe for part of a day and just drive and see if maybe I saw like a hammer out in the middle of a CRP field that I could go stalk, you know what I
Oh,
mean?
sure.
But I would always kind of come back to this one area because the area I saw 30 deer the one day, I had an encounter with a hammer, like the reason why you go to Kansas. And
Right.
I knew he was in the area and my whole thing was I was like, I'm not leaving deer to find deer. I'll drive
Yep.
around and if an opportunity pops up while I'm driving and glassing, then, I'm not going to be stubborn. I'll take the opportunity. But
Yeah.
my bread's going to be buttered in this particular area and I know it.
Yep.
And so I'm going to focus on this.
Hmm.
And that's one thing that we always, even where I was in Idaho this year, it's like we knew where elk were, we just weren't seeing them. We were in northern Idaho, so it's not like you're glassing a ton, so it's almost like still hunting elk.
Yeah.
But we were around elk every day, and so we were always like, look, we know there's a herd here. We keep hearing them, we can smell them, and we're not leaving elk to find elk, because
Right.
we at least are in them.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot of times too, like what guys need to kind of like double down on is, you know, grass isn't always greener on the other side.
Yeah.
A lot of times there ain't even any grass. You know what I mean?
Oh
So,
yeah.
But dude, how many days was this trip or how many days was this in total of like hunting? Like I know you had some like travel days and stuff like that, but from start to finish, what? Because people are hearing us talk about like day 16, day whatever. I want to give them context as to how many days you were actually like afield and or traveling to and from.
I didn't include travel days, but days I hunted, I got 97.
97. Jeez, man,
Yes.
that's a ton. And so, man, you could probably throw on another probably 3 weeks of travel, like probably another 20 days of travel.
Oh, geez. I mean, from the times I'd drive from, Missouri out to Illinois to go hunt, it just, a weekend or something like that, if I was working like, a bunch of December,
Right.
um, yeah, there was a lot of travel days, that's
Right.
for sure.
So, what all states did you make it to?
So, Missouri, or I guess it went Kentucky, Missouri, Illinois, and Nebraska.
Okay, and was it so it's all whitetail, but you said mule deer in Nebraska?
Yeah, Mule Deer, Nebraska. I
Right.
was really close to not going, but I had made a promise to some of my friends that I was going to go.
Nice.
I was hot on a deer in Illinois, but that is what it is.
Right, right.
I had a phenomenal time out there. It was fun.
Was that your first mule deer hunt?
Yes.
So, what was that experience like?
Um. It. Let's see. So I'm more used to like spotting and stalking like in Missouri.
Mhm.
If I do something like that. And the thing that probably got me the most out there was the country that these deer were living in,
Mhm.
and how like small it kind of seemed, but then whenever you actually get in there, like that country was huge.
Oh man, yeah.
And you think what's over the top of that ridge, or even if that is the top of the ridge,
Right, that's the big thing there. Yeah,
but you
100%.
don't.
Yeah. But you don't. That's exactly
um,
it.
and then like beyond that, just kind of like the whole aspect of stalking game in that country was
Yeah.
far different from what I thought it was.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. I remember, I mean, first time when I went to Kansas. I mean, the terrain's not terribly different from the two,
mhm,
between Kansas and especially if you're in like Western Kansas between that and Nebraska.
mhm,
Um, and I always kind of had in my mind that, man, you can see for forever,
yeah,
but when I got there, I was like, man, there's a lot more rolling to this terrain than I had thought. And it wasn't like getting out on a perch in western Montana where I could see 5 miles. You know what I
right,
mean? Like it wasn't like that at all. Like the glassing was a lot more limited than I had thought. Now, you could still find good spots to glass. Don't get me wrong, but it
right,
wasn't like, oh, I can just pull up anywhere and I'll see 3 miles or 2 miles or whatever. Like that
right.
just wasn't the case.
Mhm,
And I'd be curious if like you had this experience, but like what blew me away is like I would be glassing and I'd see a couple bucks or a couple deer or whatever, and if they were in the Milo, dude, like they would just vanish like in out of thin air. Like you'd see them all of a sudden and they'd be gone, you know. And even in like CRP, I'd be watching them and it looked like this terrain was flat. And I'm
yeah,
watching them. I'm like, oh, they're gonna pop out over here, and I'd be watching them have the glass on, and like out of nowhere they would just vanish and they'd just be gone. And you're like,
yeah,
how the hell did that happen? You're like watching for like a half hour, then like a half hour later, they come out. Now they're standing 300 yards to your left.
right,
And you're like, what the hell just happened? It's like, oh, that's the same deer. And then when
right,
you walk up onto that terrain or to that area, like what you start finding is like there's these like small little like I don't even call them ditches, but just like low areas that they'll get
mhm,
into to where like they just get down low enough to where you can't see them anymore.
yep,
You know what I mean? It's just it might only be 2 or 3 feet, and that's it.
yeah.
It's like,
That's actually what I ran into in Kentucky a lot.
oh
More
really?
more so, yeah, more so than Nebraska,
Hmm.
because we weren't anywhere with like that had any vegetation that was that tall
Mm-hmm.
in Nebraska. Like the main challenge there was like getting yourself in position to where you're actually like doing like like the really slow stalking. Like that whole time I was out there, I never put myself in a good enough position to like okay, we just got to close, 30 more yards and we can take a shot.
Right.
I never even made it that far, and I thought that was going to be the easy part.
Right.
You know?
So why was that the hardest part? Was it just the amount of ground you would have to cover between you and that particular setup?
Yeah, and I mean there was quite a few deer in the area. I know there was one time, there was some deer that were busted, in between, us and the big herd that the main buck that we were hunting was in, and they just take them off, and blow them out.
Mm-hmm.
And the country there was like kind of rolly, and the wind was like not that great either, and so just getting less than 100 yards seemed like it was you know a, a pretty big challenge, and that's coming from somebody that's very inexperienced at all this.
Right, right. No, I 100% agree, man. Like I've gotten, I'll say I've gotten lucky in Kansas on a couple setups where
Mm,
I have gotten close, and it wasn't stalking necessarily. It was more kind of watching for a day or two, very similar to
mm,
what you do, kind of in general. I know the last time we talked, like I know you do a lot of observation,
mm,
and just kind of, and then pick your moments, and kind of set up an ambush, kind of set
right.
or whatever, you
Mm,
know. And I mean, I did. I mean, I guess Chad and I the first year we stalked one to like within 50 yards, but we didn't realize it was. We thought we knew where it was bedded, and then we rattled and had a decoy on this for whitetails. Actually, we were actually seeing mule deer too in this unit actually, and
mm,
had one bedded, and we thought he must have slipped out the back of this draw, and we didn't see him.
yeah.
So after however long we spent kind of rattling and decoying, trying to get him to come out, we just decided to walk into this draw, and when we walked in, we kicked him up, and he jumped out of the bed right where we thought he was bedded. Like he was exactly
Mm,
where we thought he was, and that was
yeah.
just inexperience on our part. Like we should have just sat there pretty much all day until we would have seen him, because he would have had to get up to take a leak within probably like 2 hours,
Right.
or stretch or something where we would have saw
Mm,
him. And then we would have known, like, oh, okay, he's bedded here. Let's go ahead. The wind's doing this. We can make a play on the opposite side or whatever.
mm,
But most of my like close encounters out there have come on watching for like a day or 2 days and seeing what they want to do, and then going, okay, I
mm,
need to be here because this is what they want to do. And
yep.
then, getting within, 20 yards or whatever the case is. But
Right.
so, man, what was so aside from Nebraska. Well, let me ask you this, because you were talking about how big the country hunts out there. So kind of explain that for people, because I think I know what you're talking about, but what do you mean by it? You don't think it hunts that big, but when you get there, it hunts huge.
Man, that's a hard one to put into words. It's like, man, it's like I don't even know. It's like how you would explain that without like actually being there and like
Right.
experiencing it. It's like imagine you have a clear, clear as day, view of a buck. He's just a couple hundred yards over there, and you count like three ridges over. It's like, all right, there's one, two, three ridges. All right, let's go over there, and we'll pop up here, and we'll see where he's at, and then you walk for a lot longer than you think, and then you get over to where you thought the deer was, and you're like, this does not look the same, not even close. It's like, where were we at? Were we over there? It's like,
Right.
no, we were over on that ridge. It's like, so where are we at now? It's like,
Right.
I don't know. That's about the best that I could explain
Yeah,
it.
I think that's a perfect way to explain it. Actually, I think I kind of get what you're saying, but my experience was was a little bit different, and it was more around like the draws and stuff like that out there,
Mm,
out in that general area, how much deeper they were than I thought.
right,
Because that to me, it's like, it, and not just that, but just like the vastness of just like the open area. Like
right,
there's a handful of setups that you might have potentially or whatever, but it's very deceiving when you look
right.
at it. You think like, oh, deer could only be here. Like that was my
Right.
experience for Kansas. Like deer could only be here. Like this is the only place they would want to bed. Like this is the only little
Mm-hmm.
chunk of timber. But it's like, nope, they're huddled up out there in the middle of that CRP field, in the middle of nothing. You know what I mean? Where it's like,
Yep.
well, why would they be there? You know, and
Right.
that was the thing I think that I had to change kind of my perspective on how to hunt open country really quick was, and places that I usually typically would think like there can't possibly be any deer in there, that's probably where they're at.
Yep.
You know, um, and for that reason, I started predominantly hunting places that just didn't have any trees. Like,
Yeah.
because that's where people would want to go because they want to get into a tree stand or whatever. And so I
Yep.
just got comfortable with just being on the ground all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and hunting that way. And that was when
That's
I started seeing deer and having encounters and stuff like that, was just being on the ground.
Yeah. That's the same thing that happened to me in Kentucky.
Yeah. Yeah. So what were some of the hardest, I guess, or most challenging aspects of like this whole season?
I would have to think that. See, I'm gonna back up just a little bit and like back to like my general goals of the season. Like I
Yeah.
wanted to, shoot, 4 bucks. Well, after I shot that first one in Kentucky, um, I thought, this was a really good opportunity to, track down and find, possibly another Boone Crocket.
Mm-hmm.
And so that way I could have, 2 years where I've shot, two deer of that class.
Right.
Um, the hardest thing was actually finding one.
Hmm.
And I threw this on my post the other day, but it comes back to the whole use of trail cameras, because I've never used trail cameras
That's all right. Yeah.
in this last year. I almost did fulfill that goal, and the only reason is because it was because of my friend's trail camera.
Right.
They got pictures of this deer, and it's like, I can scout all that I want to, and I'm confident that I can go out, I can scout, and I could find an area where a four plus year old deer is living,
Mm-hmm.
but I have no idea what they have on their head.
Right.
And the only way you're going to get a look to see what they have on their head is if you actually get a physical sighting or a picture of them.
Right.
That's the only way. And so there was a lot of, like, especially like in Illinois and Missouri late season, there was a lot of searching.
Mm.
um and I imagine some of it was, I kind of started to realize this towards the end. It's like a lot of this is just kind of fruitless, because at the end of the day, unless I'm here hunting and see this animal, I really don't know what they have on their head. And whenever you're trying to specifically go after and try to kill these deer, you need to know where one's at. You need that knowledge.
Yeah.
um and so that was one of the hardest things that I came across, I'll say in the second part of season.
Right. So do you think will you personally start to use trail cameras like after, knowing that, your buddy's truck camera was able to kind of give you at least like the knowledge that a deer that you were interested in, was in the area when you were looking for a specific deer?
Yeah, I mean, if I want to have those goals,
Mhm.
then I almost have to.
Right.
I can. It's not necessary for Missouri early season, because I have all summer to scout and find that deer throughout the summer that I want to go chase.
Right.
But if I want to chase one later on the season, then I don't think I have a choice.
Right. So it sounds like maybe your trail camera strategy might be one of just like post rut,
Yeah, I mean,
right? To where it's like you use the early season to kind of, glass, figure out where one's at. Maybe you find the
mhm,
sign, it's like, hey, this looks like a 4 or 5 year old deer or 4+ year old deer is living in here. Let's see if we can't glass him up, lay a visual
yeah,
on him to see what caliber he is,
mhm.
and that your trail camera strategy is really just focused on the areas that you're going to hunt potentially for late season.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I mean,
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, that very well could be the case. What it ends up being for me, but it's hard saying what I'm going to do because I'm gonna have to think. It's like, do I want to have these really high goals and have to do something like that, or do I keep on doing what I was doing, which to me an average buck in Missouri, if it's 4 years old, it's probably going to be 140.
Right.
Um, or do I just keep on chasing after that class of deer, and then every once in a blue moon, I do have a Boone and Crocket class deer, come by me.
Right. Right.
Um, yeah.
Would it personally, not for other people, because people can do what they want to do. I use trail cameras. For me, it is
Hmm.
a savings of time.
Yeah.
That's, how I do it, being a working dude
Yeah.
like everybody else, have so many days. Now it's different when I go out of state because most of the time I don't have cameras out of state,
Hmm.
unless it's maybe Ohio where I have some friends, they'll run some cameras for me or whatever. My next trip to Iowa, I've got some buddies out there. I can get some cameras out and have them run them
Hmm.
for me, and they'll check them, stuff like that. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
um, but typically whenever I'm going out of state, other than, really those two places, it's really just kind of whatever I can get done within like 10, 14 days, however long I'm going to be there,
Yeah.
by scouting and pounding the pavement.
Yeah.
But I mean, do you think, would it be worth your while? Just because I know that, like, when I read your post, like, you talked about time and time being money, which was like, oh, so true. And time is a very
Yeah.
expensive commodity.
Yeah.
You know
It's
what I
very
mean?
expensive.
And so I was just curious if maybe, your mind would change about using those, just generally speaking, based on that. Or do you feel like Missouri, like early season, like places where you have, more knowledge or whatever, would it cheapen the experience for you personally?
I feel like in Missouri, it would possibly cheapen that experience.
Hmm.
For me, well, I guess when you say cheapen, like it would save me a lot of time, which, like we just said, is money.
Right.
If I were to run, like trail cameras out of state,
Hmm.
because I can't, be there all the time. I don't have that intimate knowledge, of, all the deer and, how old they are and, all that good stuff out of
Right.
state. So,
Right. When I say cheapen the experience, though, what I was more referring to, would it lessen how you felt about the experience using a trail camera versus how you feel about the experience when you don't use one?
see, I don't know. I mean, if it's something like, I guess it would depend on the situation. Like, how everybody gets up in arms, whenever somebody posts a picture on social media. It's like, yeah, I had this deer, daylighting on, my cell cam for like the last, 5 days. I went and shot him.
Right.
It would cheapen the experience there. But if it's just knowledge that a deer is there,
Hmm.
then I no, it wouldn't. I mean, it didn't in Kentucky.
Right.
It was other people's trail cameras. That's the reason that deer died.
Right. How do they feel about that?
They're seemingly happy for me.
Seemingly happy.
Seemingly,
That's awesome. That's awesome. No, I mean, it's interesting, man, because there's this whole debate around cell cameras. Now I've seen it kind of flying around. I think it's one of those things that pops up every post season or every off season because, I don't know, people need something to talk about, and so they start debating, the I guess the appropriateness of cell cameras. And I guess there's one soon that might be releasing. I don't know if it has released or if it's going to or whatever the case is, that can stream actually. So whenever a picture is sent, supposedly or hypothetically to your phone or to an app that's on your phone, whatever the case is, you can click on that picture and get a live stream of what the camera is seeing.
really.
So you can watch that. If there's a buck that's there, you can now turn it on and be like watching a YouTube video. It's like I can now watch for however long that deer is going to be in front of the camera, essentially.
Yeah.
You know, and people are like, "Well, is that too far?" And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't really know what the difference is between getting a picture, or a video via cell
Right.
versus like if someone just wants to sit at their computer and watch it for an hour, because they want to watch the deer or watch the camera. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know, but I mean, any tool in the hands of the wrong person can be misused.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, and so,
Mhm.
the difference between me having a live stream of a camera and someone who would, you know, put out bait in live stream and try to kill a deer as it's leaving that corn pile or whatever. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? Like, we're going to use it in two different ways potentially.
Right.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so I don't know if that's too far. I'm kind of the mind like technology. I don't think is going to go anywhere.
Right.
Is there a limit? I think, yeah, there should be limits to how we are allowed to use them. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But it's the same thing like in places in PA, if you have private property, you can put out, as long as you're not in an area that has CWD and stuff like that, you can put out like salt licks, mineral licks and stuff like that. And you can put a camera on it
Mhm.
and get all the inventory you want. Now, when the season opens 30 days before the season, you have to, I think it's 30 days or it might be 90 days. But X amount of days before the season, you have to remove that mineral lick. And if there are remnants on the ground, you got to remove the soil, or you can't hunt within but such a distance around that area. Like, and I don't
Right.
remember exactly what the law is, but just say for the purpose of conversation, it's 200 yards.
Yeah.
Or if you hunt any closer than that, it's illegal. You're still
Right.
considered baiting, right?
Yeah.
Well, I guarantee you, there's people that pull out their mineral blocks and then still hunt that within 20 yards of where that mineral block was.
Yeah,
You
probably.
know what I mean? So, you know what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
it's one of those things where it's like, just because you have the rule doesn't mean everyone is going to follow it.
Right.
It's like locks on doors. It keeps honest people honest. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? The person who intends to rob you is going to rob you regardless whether they had to get through the lock or not.
Right.
So I don't know, man. What do you think? Like, do you think the technology is getting a little too far, or you kind of the same mind where bad people are going to do bad things, good people are going to do good things?
Yeah, I mean, I have a couple thoughts when it comes to that. It's just like one, just like the post I made the other day, is that just the world we live in now?
Hmm.
Am I fighting this, pointless battle, try to, find and, scout and just, have the woodsmanship skills to,
Hmm.
enough to find, the deer that I'm looking for?
Hmm.
Is that unrealistic? Is this, the technology age, cell cameras and whatnot, is that just the world we live in? Or, or is there actually a process to be perfected out there to where I actually can find these deer? I don't know.
Yeah, it's tough, man. You know what I
It
mean? Because like,
Right.
I enjoy trail cameras, and I use some cell cameras, and most of them are in places like that are hard to get to. Either
Mm,
well, there's basically three criteria that I have for setting up a cell camera. One, it's got to
mm,
be a place that's really, really hard to get to where I'm not going to be able to check it, very easily, or it's in a really sensitive area where I don't want to go in unless I'm going to hunt.
right.
You know, and the other kind of one is that it's a far drive for me to get to, where it's just literally like I don't have the time to go check the camera because it's too far
Right.
away. You know what I mean?
Mm,
It might be in like a piece that's like 2 hours away that I like to hunt. But I want to know if like when a scrape heats up, because I know, a couple does are starting to hit it. All right.
mm,
When I'm off on Saturday, I'm going to be up there. You
yep.
know what I mean? So it's like I'm not really using any of it in real time. I
Right.
can't,
Mm,
but it'd be the equivalent of me being able to check the trail camera, you know what I mean?
right.
Without,
Mm,
impacting the area.
right.
You know, where it gets fuzzy for me is, if a guy's got a lease, or is back 40 and he's working from home, and gets a ping on his cell camera, hits his phone, and he's like, "Oh man, that deer's headed right toward that draw that's 200 yards out my back door. Let me throw my coat on real quick and grab my bow."
Right.
That to me then is kind of like, come on, dude. Like you didn't
Right.
even, that wasn't hunting, you
Mm,
know? And so I think there's a fine balance between it because like I appreciate the woodsmanship and that's why I like to spend time in the woods in every off season, try to sharpen myself,
mm,
you know?
right.
And I don't want to lose that, but at
Right.
the same time, I recognize I'm a working guy like everybody else and I would like to save some time, you know?
Right.
So You know?
And it is concerning, for like like kids growing up in the hunting
Yeah.
community today. They get all this shit thrown at them. Cell cams is one of them. And whenever somebody is going through the process of learning hunting, and they have that, and they base their whole process, their way of thinking around this trail camera.
Yeah.
If for some reason someday, I know there's been talk like hey, ban all the cell cameras or whatever. If that does go away, and that's all that guy knows,
Mm-hmm.
then what is he left with?
Yeah. Not much.
Not much.
Yeah.
And it's just I would like to see somebody growing up in hunting learn to hunt without the use of cell cameras or trail cameras or whatever, and then start to incorporate them into their hunting later on. um Maybe that's a fantasy world, but
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, the way I always kind of talk about it, and even my buddy Chad, who owns, Exodus Outdoor Gear, he owns a trail camera company. He's always like, these should be a tool,
yep.
not your strategy. Like they
Hmm.
shouldn't be your strategy for hunting. They should inform it. They can
Hmm.
certainly inform it. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
But it should just be looked at as another tool in your arsenal.
Right.
That supplements your woodsmanship. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? You still need to know the changing food sources. You still need to
Right.
know what wind that deer wants to use or how they're using the wind. You still need to know the different cycles of their season. It's like all those things you should still know. This should just help tell you that there is either a deer that you're looking for or the deer that
Hmm.
you know is around, but you don't know if he's alive or whatever the case is, right?
Right.
Like he always, and that's kind of how I look at them too, is like these are tools to be used. And I think too often what you're kind of talking about, and I agree with you, is that people will begin to use them as a crutch.
Hmm.
They'll solely make a decision as to whether or not they're going to go hunt. You know what I mean? On, other having deer on trail camera.
Right.
You know what I mean? Where it's like, well, it's only seeing part of it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like there could be deer there.
Hmm.
You're only getting a glimpse. You
Right.
know,
And
so
that's something I saw with cell cams down in Kentucky, and here in Missouri, is it's getting a byproduct from real time information. Is there's no way that you can get a real time picture of a deer on your trail camera and it not influence your process, your thinking process in some
mhm.
way, shape, or form.
Yep, yep,
And that's another thing that makes it
yeah,
difficult,
yeah.
because
I found
I
myself being baited by that when I first started using them. You know what I
yeah.
mean? Like it would influence like where I might hunt on a given day. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
As opposed to me going like the wind's right for this spot. This is where I need to be. All the sign I
Hmm.
saw was
Yep.
here. You
Yep.
know. So what I started doing was I only let it upload to my phone one time a day,
Hmm.
like
Yeah.
at the end of the night, or I think it's at like midnight or something like that.
Yeah.
That way, I'm not getting like the midday, like, oh man, yeah, I should be over here. You know what I mean? It's like I'm not even being tempted in that way for it to change my mind about what my strategy was based on all the things that I knew previously.
Right.
You know,
Hmm.
so man, with this voyage that you went on, dude, would you do it again after all these experiences? Is it something you would 100% do it again?
Oh, I'm gonna do it more, even more so next year.
Yeah. Nice.
Oh yeah.
You're like, man, I want to go full on insane, like 20, 30 days straight this time, start talking to birds. Like,
Oh well, I tell you what, after that 16, 17-day period where everything was going to shit, and then I was able to bring myself back.
right.
That makes me think, well, what's 30 days like?
Right. Maybe
You know,
let's taste that real quick.
let's give that a taste. What's 40 days like?
Mm.
Hunting one deer.
Oh my God, dude. I don't
You
know
know
if I
what
could do it.
what's that like? I don't know either.
I don't know if I could do it. That would be it'd have to be a hell of a deer. Put it that
Yeah.
way. You know what I mean? Like we'll just say that. But
Right.
the So would you, we're going to talk about your Kentucky bucks. I want to get into that here in a second, but
Hmm.
would you consider the experience overall that you had, looking back on it, would you consider it a success?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I got to spend time out in the woods, and I got to do a lot of learning. Um, that's another thing I realized with chasing around bigger deer is ultimately your success rate goes down,
Hmm.
but the time that you get to spend out in the field is a lot greater.
Oh man. Yeah. That was for me, and I've told this story different times on this podcast and others, but one of the biggest takeaways for me whenever I was in Iowa, because when I went to Iowa, I think I was there for 16 days, I think, and I killed my
Mm,
buck on the 16th day, like
yeah,
4:30 on the last day.
I love that.
Yeah, after I'd missed a pretty good one two different times, which
Mm.
like chapped my ass. Still does. I'm not bitter about it at all. You can tell. But and and in hindsight, one of the things I always kind of thought about with that trip, looking back on it, because I think when I missed that big one the first time, I think it was like day 5 or 6, and
Mhm.
I was like, man, I would have cheated myself out of like 10 more days of just learning
Yeah.
because I'm in Pennsylvania, and if you encounter a mature deer, not kill, but if you encounter a mature deer in some areas, not all areas, but if you encounter a mature deer in a lot of areas in Pennsylvania, like that's a good season, even if you don't kill it. Like if you
Mhm.
see within bow range ish a mature deer, like that's a good year because we don't have a lot of 4.5, 5.5 year old deer running around. Like we
Right.
just don't. We have them in pockets, but they're not
Mhm.
but they're not everywhere.
Right.
Um, and and so with that, it's like to learn what mature deer do or how mature deer act. Like you need to see them,
Yep.
right? And so while I was in Iowa, I was seeing mature deer almost every day, either
Mhm.
within relatively close range or from a distance,
Mhm.
and able just to spend time around mature deer, watching them do mature buck things.
Yep.
And the way I always kind of described it was, is I was like, man, I got a master's class for 2 weeks on what mature bucks do. Because I saw more of them in that 2 week trip than I would see in probably 5 seasons combined in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
I was like, there was no better teacher than watching a deer,
Mhm.
and so for me, it's like that was just you know, you know, worth the price of admission. I can't imagine the amount of time you spend a field, like just like all the like, even the things you don't realize that you learned that you picked up. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely. And 2 years ago, that's something that probably had something to do with why I wanted to spend so much time out in the field. This past season is because 2 years ago I shot 3 bucks and I only hunted 20 days.
Hmm.
It's like other aside from shooting those 3 deer, like what did I learn? I
Right.
was like I had like basically nothing.
Right. Man, that's the one thing I always appreciate about talking with you, man, is just like your interest in learning. Like I
Hmm.
kind of from the last time we spoke and like in this time, like I almost get the sense that you no, don't get me wrong. I know you like to fill tags, but
Yeah,
that notwithstanding, it's like I almost feel like you like the learning process as much, maybe even more than the actual releasing of the arrow.
I think that is true.
Yeah. And it's a common theme with like a lot of guys that I have on the show who I consider to be killers. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? That's the thing that they look for. It's like, what am I learning next? What's the
Yeah.
next thing? You know?
Hmm.
And it's just that constant kind of search for evolution, I think
Right.
is what makes you and guys like you, good at, you know, wrapping tags around deer, essentially,
Yeah. Hmm.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah. There was this one um, 8 pointer while I was hunting down there in Kentucky. I mean, this was a very mature 150-inch 8 pointer, and I passed him one time, but I saw that deer like every single day I was down there, and I learned so much from watching that one deer like day in and day out because he was always there,
Mm-hmm.
and it was so thrilling, especially getting to see deer do new things that like you didn't even like
Mm-hmm.
didn't even come across my mind
Mm-hmm.
before. and then I get to watch this thing. It's like if I go shoot this 8-pointer right now, it's over.
Yeah.
You know, I don't get to I don't get to learn anymore. The learning curve stops, and and I pack up and I go home, and I didn't. I no, don't get me wrong. Under any normal circumstances, I would have shot that deer.
Right. How many days? How many days do you see him?
Oh shoot. Um, Pretty sure it had to have been like 10+ days.
Jeez, man. On day 3, he had been dead. I would have been like learning. I've learned enough. I'm good.
Dude, it was it was day 18, I think. It was later on in the trip.
Mhm.
It's like day, yeah, I think it would have had to have been 18, maybe 19. Um, this was one of the only times that I actually saw a deer standing up, like while it was, still daylight out. Because other than that one time, every other time these bucks were bedded down
Mhm.
before daylight, and
Mhm.
then they'd get up sometime in the morning. That's when I'd see them.
Mhm.
There was one time that I saw this deer out in the field, and I didn't know what deer it was because his cage was the same size as the other deer I was chasing.
Mhm.
And crap. I'm like, he's in a really good spot to do a stalk. And I was like, I'm gonna have to put a stalk on this deer because I don't know which one it is. Well,
Right.
I go ahead and stalk the deer, and at 8:30 the thing stands up, 40 yards wide open, and it went through my head right then. It's like, all right, well, it's not the deer I'm chasing, and the deer, that 8-pointer, lays back down, and all of a sudden, then I had this whole fit in my head for the rest of the day. It's like, oh, it's like, oh, I could totally just sit right here and kill this thing in the next few hours.
Right.
And I had to make myself leave.
Right. Right. Well, yeah, because I mean that's a great experience and great story just in general, right there. You know what I mean? Like as
Mhm.
far as like stalking him and like the whole, it doesn't get much better than that.
Right.
From an experience standpoint. But
Mhm.
so, man, I want to since we're talking about Kentucky, I want to kind of transition over to this deer. Well, first, before we get there, how many tags did you end up filling on the trip? I know Kentucky you filled.
I filled one tag.
Yeah. Okay. So
So yeah.
we're going to talk about that buck. So when you got there, you talked about earlier. I think it was like 27 days straight, or 27 days hunting in Kentucky or something to um, that effect. How long did it take you to find the particular deer that you ended up killing? And did you go into it kind of chasing a Boone and
So
Crocket deer to begin with, or did this deer just kind of reveal himself, if you will?
so this was a interesting kind of situation. I got an invite from a guy over social media, so I knew that deer was down there
Hmm.
already. Now I didn't hop into it right away. That area that deer was in, because I knew that guy, he was going to be chasing them, pretty hard. There was really two main deer down there, and they're both relatively in the same spot.
Hmm.
Um, so I knew I didn't want to jump in, like right away. I kind of I wanted to go off and do my own thing for a couple of days, because I didn't know what all the area had to offer. I didn't have any sort of pattern.
Hmm.
So what I needed to do first is I needed to get just the general pattern down, which took me, I think it was like that at the end of day 3, everything started to come together.
Hmm.
In day 4, I kind of shored this up, and that's when I went over to that area that these two deer were in. That's when I started hunting.
Okay.
Um,
So what did you do to kind of like? Let me first ask this question first. So
yeah,
had you hunted Kentucky at all before, or was this the first time?
I had never stepped foot in Kentucky
Okay.
before opening day.
Okay, that's what I thought. So when you say you spent like first 3 days just kind of like trying to understand a pattern, like what were you looking for, especially if you weren't really in the area that this deer was in? Like what were you looking to learn that you could apply to this other area?
So basically, what I'm looking for is what all food sources are available,
Hmm.
whether that be crop, whether that be natural browse, anything like that.
Hmm.
Um, I guess other things I look for is like just like naturally, like I like to look for like overlooked spots.
Hmm.
So while I'm doing the scouting, I'm also finding, like backup areas and, backup, deer that I could, potentially go to.
Right.
Um, I guess if you trying to think if there's like a specific thing that I said I was looking for, there wasn't really anything specific. It's just more like what are the mature bucks doing,
Mm.
and then I take that pattern and I run with it.
Okay, got it. So you want to see a couple mature deer and go, all right, they tend to do this. They're moving around this time,
Yep.
potentially, right? So all
Hmm.
things being equal, other mature deer in the area should be acting about the same as long as they're not getting extremely pressured or whatever the
Right.
case is, right?
Hmm.
So so when was the first time? So you kind of spent some time. Sounded like three to like your fourth day when you kind of confirmed, your pattern. When was the first time you actually laid eyes on this deer? And at this
So
point, were you all in on this deer? Was it this deer or bust, or were you still kind of on the fence at like, maybe?
so it was the the deer I actually ended up shooting. I did not see him until the day I shot him.
Hmm.
He was shot on the third day of season by another hunter.
Hmm.
The guy actually ended up hitting him in the rack, and the deer was, to my knowledge, ghost.
Mm-hmm.
Until the day I shot him. The
Yeah.
other deer was keeping me very much so company,
Hmm.
and this was a deer that was, probably right there at Boone Crocket as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really the deer that I spent, all my time, basically,
Mm-hmm.
um, chasing around. Um, that deer, I saw him on like day 5 or something,
Okay.
and every just to give you a little context, I'll give you the pattern that I eventually found. And I've never found anything else like this. I hope it happens again, but I doubt it will. But these deer were actually living in soybeans.
Hmm.
I have never seen soybeans this tall in my life. I mean, I'm talking like shoulder height.
Jeez.
So these deer, they were just simply living out in the soybeans. So like the third day of season, I was I'd actually gone over and I was joining the guys like you were saying earlier, deer in wide open spaces, not where you think they would be.
Right.
And everybody that's hunting is hunting where there's trees.
Yep.
Well, I was joining that crew, but I always try to make a point to leave, some sort of try to get a kill sit and also do somewhat of an observation.
Mm-hmm.
And that night, I I parked my car. I walked through this patch of soybeans over to my tree, and I could see my car from where I was sitting. And 45 minutes before dark, whatever, there was like this 140-inch 8-pointer that stood up 100 yards away from my car. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is what's going on.
Right.
Yeah, kind of the same stuff I'm used to seeing in Missouri. Deer being really, close to the roads. Not where there's not any trees.
Right.
So the fourth day glassing, first thing in the morning, I saw a couple bucks out in the field, and they were younger deer, but I saw them lay down. I'm like, okay, that's like for sure, what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I go over and I spend, I think it was like 2 days in this area, and because there's a bunch of guys that know about these deer, and there's a bunch of guys hunting them. I think I was the 10th or 11th guy
Mm.
to hunt these deer, and this this other deer, I think it was like I said, day 5 or 6 or something like that. Whenever I saw him the first time, and then other than that, he was in this one soybean patch I was watching. He was in that patch on average once every 3 days.
Mm.
Um, so that's what really kept me the most company there.
Right. Was that deer kind of continually come back? So what day did dude shoot the big one in the rack?
That was the third day of season.
Third day. So are you thinking like I'm guessing you caught wind of that or someone told you that happened?
Yes.
And so were you thinking like, yeah, that deer's like he ain't coming back. Like he's
Yeah, I mean, everything that I knew, it's like, well, that deer's, not coming back. He's gone. So he was somewhat off the radar.
Mhm.
But I figured if this deer was anywhere, he was living in this big patch of corn that was in that area as well. So, um, like my morning or my daily routine was I would sit at my glassing spot, and this was some of that stuff I'm telling you about. It was just really, really cool to, see and learn.
Yeah.
Um, so generally how the day would go is I would get to my glassing spot, and I normally wouldn't see anything stand up until probably 8 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
And then anywhere it depended on the day and the on the moon phase and whatnot. But sorry, I got another call coming through. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I got you. Good.
Okay. Um, so I would sit there until 11 o'clock, because there was days where these deer would be bedded down before daylight and they wouldn't even stand up until 11 o'clock in
Hmm.
the day.
Right.
And that was on days where like the moon phase was better for evening activity.
Hmm.
Um, but regardless, I was always there until that time. And if this other deer was running around, I would go hunt him in the deer I actually end up shooting.
Hmm.
There was a watering hole that was right next to the corn, and I passed up a bunch of deer, some decent bucks there, but that was kind of the daily, in and out routine.
So figuring out that they were kind of bedded in that soybean or potentially even the corn that was nearby, like what are you thinking as far as how you're going to set up to try to kill one of these bucks? Because that's a tricky situation, right? It's like
Yeah.
you want to be in the timber to hunt them, but if they have this tall ass soybeans all around, they've got food.
Hmm.
They don't really have a need to leave the soybeans if they really don't want to. You know what
Right.
I mean? So it's
And
like, what are you
yeah.
thinking as far as like to try to get a shot opportunity at one of these big ones?
So I'll tell you that there's another issue with all this as well, but pretty much what would happen is if you wanted to, get in, put a stalk and get a shot on these deer, is they would stand up usually somewhere, like I said, around the 8:30, time frame in the morning.
Hmm.
And this was right during the time that the day winds were picking up,
Hmm.
and they were shifting their beds around sometimes for the wind. Sometimes they'd stand up, look around and, stretch out, and just lay right back down. But once you have that sighting, and you have a good consistent wind, that's what I was talking about, the day winds,
Yep.
that's when you move in for your stock. And then usually by sometime right around 11 o'clock, they'd stand up again. And that's when you get your shot opportunity.
Okay.
Now, the problem with hunting deer when the soybeans are that tall is the no clear shooting lane to their vitals.
Right.
So this other deer that I was chasing around, over 5 encounters, Um, I was within range of this deer for 15 plus hours,
Jeez.
and I never got a shot on this deer because he never left soybeans that were lower than his eyeballs. Yeah, if he could see, he thought he was in danger, but if
Right.
he couldn't see, he thought he was safe. But I could see his rack.
Right. That's funny, man. So how did the hunt finally like eventually play out? Like where you got a shot at the deer you ended up killing? Like where was your setup and how did that all come together?
So I had moved. As the last crack that I had at that other deer, I was set up on him. I'd been sitting there out in that field for like 8 hours, just getting blasted by the sun.
Ugh. Brutal. Yeah,
And
because we're talking
yeah,
Kentucky in like early September.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it was hot.
Yeah. And buggy.
Um, yeah. These other guys end up seeing these deer or seeing that deer, and they put a stalk on them. They saw me, and make a long story short, they started moving quicker towards where the deer was laying. So I did, and they bumped the deer, past me, and I sat there for another 4 days. And at that fourth day, whenever that deer didn't come back, I figured the thing was gone.
Right.
And so it's time to start looking again. So I shifted areas just a little bit, maybe a couple hundred yards, to where I could get a look at a different patch of beans,
Mhm.
and honestly, where all the pressure was.
Hmm.
I had found this. This is what I was talking about. I like to set up for a kill set,
Mhm.
plus an observation if I can.
Right.
There was this. There was this patch of trees in the corn that I scouted one day, and there's just hammered beds everywhere. And I'm like, okay, so tomorrow morning, I have like a north wind, which would be perfect for me to hunt this. So I set up a stand, and I also left a window to view out in the beans.
Hmm.
And so that next morning, I got up there. There was a little bit of a cold front moving through, and I look out in the beans, and I can see like a couple does heads, bobbing up. Um, and it was like 7:30 that morning. I look out in the field, and I see this cage out there, and I thought it was the other deer I was hunting at first, but I thought something looked kind of funny,
Hmm.
and I threw the binos up, and I was like, oh boy. I was like, I know who that is. And other than other than that 8 pointer that I just had in front of me, just a couple days before that, that was a really good situation to get a deer killed. This was the second best situation that I saw the whole time I was there. He had beans going almost up to his back, which, like I said, for there was really good.
Hmm.
And so I watched the deer. I watched him until he laid back down. And as soon as he laid back down, I made a couple, mental notes. I arranged it. I got on Onyx. I tried to draw a line, to where the deer was, just to try to get as accurate as I could.
Hmm.
Um, and I got out of my tree. I ran back to my car, and I drove around like 250 yards to get a different angle on the deer. And then I went ahead and I put my stock on this deer, and I got set up in my spot at about 8:30 in the morning. And from my wonderful math skills, I thought I was about 40 yards away from the deer.
Right.
I was a little scared to get closer, just because I knew I didn't know exactly where the thing was.
Right.
So I'm sitting there, and I'm thinking, okay, this deer's probably going to stand up, somewhere right here around, 11 o'clock. And I'm sitting there, I'm looking out in front of me, and all of a sudden I just catch this weird shape um, out to my right. And I look up, and that deer just stood up, and he's at 29 yards.
A little closer than you thought.
A little closer than I thought. And I had just looked at my phone right before that. It was like 10:59.
Oh wow.
So he was
Yeah.
like right on. I was
Yeah.
like
Right on time.
right on time.
Yeah.
Very nice of him. Um. So
So are you sitting in the middle of the beans at this point? You're in the
yep,
beans. Okay.
yep,
Yeah.
yep. I'm in the beans. Um. So this deer, it's whenever they stand up, usually they'll look around, check out their surroundings real quick,
Hmm.
and then they'll kind of calm back down. And sometimes they'll start feeding, sometimes they'll lay back down. Well, he started feeding after standing there for a little bit. So what I did was I waited for his head to go down and start feeding, and then that gave me the opportunity to draw my bow and stand all the way up. And like I said, even though I was standing all the way up, all I could really see was like barely just the tip top of this deer's back.
Mm-hmm.
And part of this whole dilemma, with me not shooting this other deer down there is was just the ethical, where do I shoot this deer?
Right.
Because the people that were people that had experience with that, if they did have experience with it, um, they were like, well, you either shoot through the beans and there's a really good chance for arrow deflection,
Mm-hmm.
um, or you shoot them in the neck.
Right.
And I was that was the thing that I was struggling with a lot, because just like what's the more ethical
Shot. Right.
shot?
Yeah.
Do you take the shot you can see, or do you aim at the vitals, like you should? So I had decided that I was going to, if anything, I was going to try to shoot this deer mid body,
Mm-hmm.
because I knew I did not want to be anywhere close to that shoulder.
Right.
And I thought to myself, if anything, I'm going to hit low, because I'm not going to be high.
Right.
So this deer put its head down, started feeding. I go ahead and I go to full draw. And my plan is I was going to wait for his head to come back up. And so that way I can draw a line, down his neck, to where I think, through his shoulder and to where, his mid body should be. And I stood there full draw for about a full minute.
Dang.
And the deer finally picked his head back up. And I took my 30-yard pin. I moved it right down his neck, right, I'm aiming in beans at this point,
Mm-hmm.
obviously.
Right.
And, right in the middle of the body. And, I touched that one off, and I heard it impact the deer. I didn't know where it hit him. But as soon as the deer started running off, I got the binos on him, and he ran out there to 63 yards and stopped and looked around. And I immediately hit the ground. And at that point, the deer was out of the beans. He was staying in the wide open.
Right.
So I went ahead. I got another got another arrow knocked. Dialed down my sight, and drew back and stood up again and shot him. And I mean, I just absolutely pounded him that time.
Nice.
And he probably went 20 yards past that shot and piled up. I didn't get to see him pile up, but he went into a really tall patch of CRP then, and piled up just inside there.
Dude, so how stoked were you? Like, what was your thought immediately after that?
I pretty much freaked out.
As you should.
uh, I mean, you take, everything that I had, been through, those 20 days, and, getting to learn all the things that I got to learn, and, going through that, that mental, struggle of just, getting out there and staying in it, every day. Um, and being so close to that other deer, that whole time, and never getting a shot, and just, frustrated, and all that, and to come out on top with the biggest buck that was running, probably a pretty decent sized area. It felt pretty good.
Nice, man. When you what did you think when you put your hands on him for the first time?
Oh, honestly, it didn't even it didn't even feel like it was real.
Yeah.
It was just shock, honestly.
Yeah. What did you end up what did you tape out at?
So actually, we got a couple different scores here lately. We got anywhere from 182 to 189.
Nice.
So he's somewhere right in there.
Nice. Yeah, dude. He's a freaking hammer, dude.
Yeah.
It's a big freaking deer, man. I was
Yeah.
stoked for you when I saw the post, dude, because I knew you had kicked off your trip this past September. And when I saw you post that, I was like, get out of here, dude. I was like I was like, that's unreal, man. Like, and it's insane too because of the amount of pressure that you were in that area. I mean, I'm assuming all public, right, in that area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so it's just the number of guys that were hunting that deer, or just I imagine probably that deer plus like the two other ones that you kind of knew were in the area, that big 8 and then the other big one that you were chasing around.
Yeah.
So it's like it wasn't like nobody knew about it.
Right. I mean, there was at some point, my car was parked there so often, not only the hunters in that area, but also like locals started to, like, there was one day that a guy that I'd never seen before just came up to me, on the road and was asking me about these deer. I'm just like, how do you know about these deer? Well, that competing with all the other guys, there's private right next to it, which I knew that the guy that was hunting there, he has cell cameras. There's cell cameras scattered all throughout, that little section that I was hunting. There's 10 other guys hunting it as well, and I'm just one guy.
Yeah.
I felt outnumbered.
Right.
And the local guys that are down there, they're kind of working as a team.
Right.
And it's just like, man, I have, this is a hard thing, just because of knowledge and eyeballs out in the field.
Right. Did a thought ever cross your mind just to kind of like take off and go somewhere else where there wasn't as much pressure?
Yeah, there was, but that was around those hard days that I was talking about, day 16, day 17.
Yeah.
Because not only was there that 1 8-pointer there, I knew where there was another, I don't know, probably like 150-inch 10-pointer, hanging out.
Right.
That I just never, I never even gave the time of day. So there was quite a few times where I just kind of wanted to pack it up and head out, but I just stuck to my guns there.
Yeah, it's good, man. Dude, well, I'm stoked for you, man. It's a hell of a deer. You had a hell of a season. I'm looking forward to seeing what you do. What you do next year. One of these days, maybe we'll see each other in person and share a malted beverage together and celebrate. How's that sound?
It sounds good to me.
Awesome, man. Hey, buddy, before I let you get going, man, I want to be sensitive to your time. Let folks out there know where they can find out more about you, follow along, and take part or consume whatever content you might have out in the world.
Sure. So it's just Facebook and Instagram. That's all I have. Jace Allen on Facebook, JACEALLEN. You can look up my name on Instagram too, or my lovely Instagram handle, Nature of the Beast.
Nature of the Beast. Wasn't there a video that came out too recently or not too long ago about some?
Yeah. So my season last year, my $3 season, it's on YouTube on the Whitetail Addictions channel.
Yeah. So folks, go check that out. Get yourself a pool of the one and the only Jace freaking Allen. Thanks, buddy. I appreciate you coming on, man.
Absolutely, anytime.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank all of you for listening, and if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast. And hell, while you're at it, head over to YouTube and give us a sub there as well. I'd be super appreciative if you do those couple things for me. Before I shut this thing down, I need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible: Spartan Forge, Tethered, Exodus Outdoor Gear, and Genesee Beer. And until next time, we'll see y'all.